Why, in this debate, you first of all deny that that is going on, and secondly, think the problem is a spectator cover cartoon.
I've never denied that there are issues.
I do not understand.
On these
the problem is not the spectator cover.
I think the issue is you're
Miriam
trying
first. I want to speak to Daniel
support,
Hannan. Miriam, respond to that.
You're trying to suggest what you're trying to do is support the Gove's agenda.
In the heat of a debate, emotions can explode when the pressure is on and the truth cuts deep. We are here with a hostile confrontation that will leave you on the edge of your seat.
The thing, either you think this has all been, do you think this has all been made up?
I think
do you think it's all been...
Douglas Murray delivers a blistering reality check that sends a Muslim woman, Myriam Francois, into a tailspin. This isn't just a debate, it's a battleground where free speech clashes with deeply held beliefs, where the stakes are nothing less than the integrity of a free society. Should we shield ourselves from harsh realities to protect our feelings or dare to speak the truth, no matter how brutal? So get ready to see how Myriam reacts when faced with a truth so harsh, so unrelenting, that it pushes her to the breaking point. This is a debate you won't forget. First of all, let's check out Myriam's point of view.
When he has these particular views, do you support the right of the school to have him there and his right to go in and talk?
I think schools should be vetting the people who speak to children much more closely than clearly they have been. But I do take issue with the idea that this reflects some sort of radicalisation because some overzealous governors are wanting to impose social conservative mores within the school. I think the problem really is to do with the fact that this government and the government before it, in fact, has allowed schools to develop a much more independent ethos. And in fact, that allows academies and free schools to give governors a much greater say in how schools are run, in the ethos, in even how the curriculum is defined to some extent.
Myriam Francois offers a thought-provoking critique of how schools are governed, particularly when it comes to the autonomy granted to faith-based institutions. She raises a valid point about the need for careful vetting of speakers, but her stance may underestimate the risks associated with allowing schools too much freedom in shaping their ethos. She argues that the push for social conservatism within certain schools doesn't necessarily amount to radicalization, and she challenges the idea that this independence inevitably leads to extremism. However, this perspective might be overlooking the subtle yet significant ways in which deeply conservative or isolationist views, when left unchecked, can create a breeding ground for extremist ideologies, especially among young, impressionable minds.
So, in doing so, it is effectively saying to communities, you can define your local ethos according to your own views. But then when it doesn't like the way in which communities form their own ethos, form their own curriculums...
That's what I meant by the sort of Govian principles.
It is absolutely Govian principles. And to be fair, the other issue is that this government really is playing a double speak here. It can't, on one hand, talk about the issue of cultural isolation and support faith schools. Faith schools develop all sorts of forms of cultural isolation. That isn't to say they should be promoted in any secular schools, but to suggest that's a form of extremism suggests this government is actually supporting forms of extremism in faith schools.
Her critique of the government's approach, supporting faith schools while condemning cultural isolation, highlights a real inconsistency. But by labeling this as doublespeak, Myriam might be missing the bigger picture. The challenge isn't just about rhetoric, it's about the real-world consequences of allowing cultural isolation to go unaddressed in a society that thrives on diversity and integration. While Myriam makes a compelling case for respecting community autonomy and avoiding alarmist labels like radicalization, her stance could benefit from a more balanced view. There's a fine line between preserving cultural values and enabling environments where extremist views can quietly take hold. Both schools and the government need to tread carefully to ensure that independence doesn't inadvertently open the door to the very extremism they seek to prevent. This debate isn't just about governance. It's about the kind of society we want to build.
Let's get back to this particular issue and the alleged extremism that has been going on. Not the Trojan horse context. We don't want to conflate two issues here. But Douglas Murray, you know, 95% of children in a particular area are of the Muslim faith. You were complaining in your article in The Spectator that in one primary school, Music was banned. That's kind of another issue. But raffles and tombolas were banned. I mean, what do you want to do? Do you want to encourage Muslim children to gamble? What's your problem with that? It should reflect the nature of the school.
So first they came for the tombolas.
For what?
Look, the problem
Gambling
going on
wrong
here,
in those communities.
The problem going on here is we're in the middle of a debate. I mean, the nation is going through something very substantial change, and I think that what we've been discussing in recent days and what we've been discussing this morning kind of reflects this. I mean, until very recently, you know, if you said to people, and it comes back to the British values thing as well, if you said to people until very recently, what is Britain, what are British values, you'd have got a fairly clear reply along the lines of, you know, a Protestant Christian country, we have institutions of church and state and monarchy and so on, which represent the country. As one of the results of mass immigration of recent decades, there has been a substantial change in the country. All sorts of good things have come from that, and some negatives have. But one of the things that has come from it is this confusion about what it is we are. We want to be open and tolerant. We want people to be able to practice their faiths. We want people to be able to express themselves and live the lives they want to live. What we're finding it very hard to do at the moment, and I mean the French secular example has already come up, is to work out where our lines are drawn as a nation, because they're not clear at the moment.
It's impossible to draw those lines, isn't it?
It may prove impossible. It may be that we do something like the French state did and try to draw very clear lines. That's what you've heard in recent days. There's a bit of it already this morning, that, you know, there's a problem with some schools that are actually, you know, state secular schools that happen to have had...
How bad are these problems?
The problems exposed in Sir Michael Wilshaw's report are pretty serious, and there's more to come.
Really, what's so serious in the report?
I think, for instance, I mean, Wilshaw himself says that these children are at risk of cultural isolation. There have been findings of children, for instance, being taught in assembly to chant anti-Christian chants and so on. This is very unpleasant sectarian stuff.
Did you know that none of the kids were spoken to?
But
did you know that none of the people in that school were spoken to during that so-called investigation?
And there are many white schools
the teachers were not spoken to either. Isolation. You come to Stamford Hill, where I live, we're not far away from our house. We have a particular community, the Jewish community, who live in a very isolated way. Nobody says anything about them. I have no problem with that. Hold on, I have no problem with that. If that's what they want to do, that's their choice. But we don't create a big fuss over the Jewish communities, especially that particular community living in that way. Why cause a fuss over a report that was made out of a hoax letter,
But you acknowledge there are issues.
I did say.
Now Douglas Murray takes the stage to confront a deeply divisive issue: the alleged extremism creeping into state schools. On the other side, another debater dives in and fiercely challenges Murray's perspective, arguing that the lines between cultural expression and extremism are being dangerously blurred. As Murray lays out his concerns about the erosion of British values, he paints a picture of a nation struggling with its identity in the face of mass immigration. He warns of growing confusion, where the lines of tolerance and national identity have become so blurred that even state schools, meant to be secular, are at risk of cultural isolation and sectarianism. He highlights troubling reports of anti-Christian chants being taught to children and questions the integrity of these institutions. But his opponent is quick to strike back, dismissing the allegations as overblown and pointing out the inconsistencies in Murray's argument. He draws a comparison to the Jewish community, who live in cultural isolation without attracting the same level of scrutiny or concern. Why, he asks, should Muslim communities be treated any differently? The so-called investigation that Murray references, he argues, was flawed from the start, rooted in a hoax letter and lacking credibility.
Douglas Murray, you can't force people to believe things. You can't shoehorn people into a particular Douglas Murray-shaped, David Cameron-shaped Britishness.
No.
Can you?
No, I mean, this is part of... By the way, just very quickly, I mean, on this matter of this, I mean, I do think that one of the things...
But address that issue about...
Okay, can I just mention first, one of the interesting things that's come up in recent days and weeks, I think, over this whole Trojan horse business, is I think that some Muslims in this country, in particular a lot of Muslim spokespeople, a lot of Muslim groups have been furious about these revelations and are now denying them. They're still denying them. And this is something like happened in the Catholic Church over the paedophilia scandal. People just don't want to admit it. They don't want dirty laundry to be aired in public. They genuinely think that, and that's why there's still this denial even now. There's an official report by Sir Michael Wilshaw. It's found some very disturbing things. Some people still think that they don't exist.
Is this the same Sir Michael Wilshaw who just did a U-turn on what Gov did or didn't tell him?
But Miriam, the thing, either you think this has all been, do you think this has all been made up?
I think
do you think it's all been made up?
What I actually know is that there are serious governance issues, there have been internal administrative issues, whether there are issues of extremism, which is what you're peddling, and what in fact the publication you work for is peddling by publishing one of the worst covers in this country that I have ever seen, suggesting that young children are vehicles for extremism and terrorism. You should be ashamed to be associated.
Daniel, in a minute.
Can I just give, this is a very good example of the problem. Miriam, you are a very prominent spokesperson. You're a voice. You're a very prominent convert to Islam. You have a voice.
I'm not. I don't call myself a convert.
Okay,
so don't call me one.
Whatever it is you want to call yourself, you have a voice. Here are some problems that are coming up, which have been exposed in schools that seem to be teaching very seriously unpleasant things, and they're being taught by some extremist Muslims. Why, in this debate, you first of all deny that that is going on, and secondly, think the problem is a spectator cover cartoon.
I've never denied that there are issues.
I do not understand.
On these three,
the problem is not the spectator cover.
I think the issue is you're
Miriam first. I want to speak to Daniel Hannan. Miriam, respond to that.
You're trying to suggest what you're trying to do is support the Gove's agenda here, which is there are absolutely issues within these schools, and I think everyone, including the Hands Off Birmingham School campaign and others, have acknowledged that there are certain people who should even stand down as a consequence of some of the revelations in this report and reports that will come. The issue, however, is trying to rebrand this as an issue of extremism in order to expand this idea of extremism being non-violent ideas.
Or indeed Nick Griffin had been asked to come along and speak in a school.
Neither of the equivalents of those two individuals were invited to speak in these schools.
Well, I'm sorry, Shady Al-Sulaiman is a man who's called... What?
His views are worse than
What are his views?
Well, anyone who supports Al-Qaeda in public, anyone who supports the ideology of Al-Qaeda...
Who says he supports
anyone
Al-Qaeda?
Who supports the
I'm not defending him, but who says...
People being stoned to death.
He shouldn't be invited to address...
Are you saying he's not as bad as Gert Wilders and Nick Griffin? Wait, one at a time.
I'm absolutely saying he should be invited to address
You're saying he's not as bad as Gert Wilders or Nick Griffin?
I'm saying you can't compare the people who are speaking in these schools. I don't know about this particular speaker.
Mary, let me finish my point, please.
You can finish your point, but I'm saying to you, you have to allow people to speak in this country.
Allow me to speak.
Douglas Murray presents a view that highlights genuine concerns about the infiltration of extremist ideologies into educational settings. He argues that ensuring schools remain secular and free from radical influences is essential to preserving British values and maintaining social cohesion. His stance reflects a strong commitment to safeguarding the integrity of the educational system and protecting students from potentially harmful ideologies. Now, Miriam counters this perspective by challenging the extent and nature of the alleged extremism. She argues that some of Murray's concerns might be exaggerated or based on flawed evidence. By drawing comparisons with other communities and questioning the reliability of certain reports, this view emphasizes the need to avoid unfairly targeting specific groups and to ensure that any claims of extremism are substantiated and not used to stigmatize entire communities. Well, both arguments present valid concerns. Murray's focus on protecting secular values in education is crucial, while his opponents caution against overgeneralizing and ensuring fair treatment of all communities is equally important. The challenge lies in navigating these complex issues with a balanced approach that respects diversity while maintaining the integrity of the educational system.
If we can all agree that Nick Griffin should not be invited to speak to children...
Of course he shouldn't, and neither should this speaker, but nobody said he should.
Can I finish my point? And if we can agree there, then we should also, by implication, agree that anyone who believes in ideas far more reprehensible should not be invited to speak at schools. It's a moot point. It's just not something we should even be debating.
Yes, it's a platitude.
The fact that
Can I
we're
make a
defensive
point?
about that the fact that we're defensive about that is illustrative of the problem.
I'll come to you with a question.
Nobody's defensive about it.
No, Daniel Hannan is next. I want to bring it back. Peter Hitchens, thank you. I want to bring it back. And I think you've both, with huge respect, dealt with that particular issue. And we're going to park it for now.
In the evolving debate, Murray and Miriam are joined by Daniel in a discussion that further enriches the complexity of addressing extremism in schools. Daniel argues that individuals with extremist beliefs, such as those who advocate for extreme punishments or ideologies, should not be allowed to speak in schools. His position is that any person with fundamentally unacceptable views, regardless of the specific nature of their extremism, poses a risk to the integrity and values of the educational environment. Miriam, on the other hand, highlights the importance of ensuring that scrutiny and criticism are fair and based on reliable evidence. Miriam questions whether the focus on extreme views might unfairly target specific communities or individuals, and argues that the discussions should be nuanced and not reduced to blanket accusations. Daniel's contribution shifts the focus to broader political and social dynamics, suggesting that the debate might also reflect larger trends and issues in European politics. Both arguments contribute valuable perspectives. Daniel's emphasis on protecting educational environments from extremist ideologies is important for upholding secular values, while Miriam and Daniel's caution about fairness and context helps ensure that discussions do not unfairly stigmatize or generalize about specific communities. Balancing these viewpoints involves a careful consideration of evidence, context, and the broader implications of policy decisions. Well, we've witnessed a high-stakes battle where every word matters and every perspective counts. As the dust settles, the question remains: how do we strike the right balance? Now the stage is yours. Do you side with Murray's call to shield these schools from extremist influences, or do you think Miriam's emphasis on fairness and evidence is the way to go? Are you ready to weigh in on this electrifying debate? Hit the comments and let your voice ring out.